Hello, everybody, and welcome. This is The Other Side. I'm Mo Ray. Hope you had a good Labor Day weekend. And a shout out to all the union people out there because you're the reason we have Labor Day. You're the reason that workers have safer working conditions and all that good stuff, even though only about 10% of your fellow Americans are union members. And that's a sad thing, I think. And the thing is, they're making it so hard to even organize now. It's going to be hard for unions to ever rebuild to the levels they once had. At one point, almost 40% of Americans were in unions. We're a long way from that now. But that's not really what I wanted to talk about. First of all, I'll say hi, Mario. He's over there.
Oh, nice to see you.
Good to see you. Oh, that's the first time I saw him with the mask down. I see whiskers, little beard action coming on. Okay. But anyway, glad to be with you, as I said. But I wanted to talk about something about just the whole environment we're living in right now politically. You know things are very tense, and you know that Biden supporters and Trump supporters are basically like oil and water. I had an experience the other day. I finally got the courage to put my Trump sign. I said my Trump sign? No. Okay, boy, that's way off. No, I'm thinking about a guy who actually lives at the end of my street, and he's got a Trump flag, and it's been there for over a year. But the thing is, I put in my Biden-Harris sign on Sunday, and as soon as I put it in, I took a picture of it. As soon as I took that picture, here comes around the corner on his red motorcycle and his German-style helmet, my neighbor, the guy with the Trump flag. So in neighborly fashion, he shouted out to me, "I hope your house burns down." Wow, not the reaction I expected. And then I responded with a response that was about as weak as day-old iced tea. I said, "Back at you," which back at you is not even cool when Ellen says it. It certainly wasn't cool in that situation. But ultimately what I did, just in case things were to escalate or something happens to my sign in the future, I did call the police. And I'll tell you that, of course, getting hollered at by a guy is not high on the list of priorities for crime fighters out there. So it was 3 hours before the cop got there. I thought he wasn't going to come, but he did come. I told him what happened. He said he'd go down and have a word with the guy. He said, I said, he didn't threaten me directly. He said, no, but that was a veiled threat. I guess my point in all this is, where are we at with this? Is this the country we want, where we're literally fighting in the streets? And that's what it's turning into. We've had 4 years of heated rhetoric on social media. We've had demonstrations, and now people are in the streets as we speak. I would like to see the demonstrations come to an end myself. I would like to see everybody just settle down and let's get ready for the election that is less than 60 days away. I think that the images from some of these demonstrations feed into the Trump law and order narrative, even though they don't tell you about all the tons of demonstrations that are taking place where there is no violence. Those aren't the ones that get run on a loop on Tucker Carlson and those kind of shows. But I wanted you to look at this. Trump supporters literally, and once again, this is what fascinates me about Black Lives Matter, the number of white people who are involved here. But Trump supporters chased down Black Lives Matter supporters in Portland, Oregon.
Get up, you pussy! Here,
Holy shit! That's for everything that you did to me, bitch! Told you I'd get you!
Get out of here! Get out of here! Oh, you can back! Back up! Back up!
Yeah? You know who that little girl was? Back up. Come on, you gotta take your shot from
back here. Let's go. Give us space. Move. Give us space.
Well, there you go. There's some patriots between waving their flag and throwing punches. That's where we're going on that side. But then it's not limited to these people. I certainly don't want to indict all the Trump supporters as being violent and that kind of thing, because you also have the same thing on the other side. And you got to wonder, I don't know, where are we going as a country? You know, the famous thing about a house divided cannot stand, that Lincoln said, which was, he lifted that from the Bible. I forgot exactly where, but that is a biblically based quote of his. But this was the flip side of the whole thing, and it lasts a lot less, you know, it doesn't last nearly as long. So here's a Trump supporter versus a Black Lives Matter supporter, and watch, it goes pretty quick.
Hey, hey, hey! I ain't gonna lie, man. Should just. Hey, hey, hey! I ain't gonna lie, man. Should just got.
Things just got real. That's what they got. But so there you go. Interesting. That didn't, like I said, that one didn't last so long. That's why we played it twice, just so you could see what happened there. Now, I don't know what prompted that little altercation any more than I know what happened in the first one. But Debbie says, sadly, I'm not sure anybody can heal this broken nation. I'm afraid we reached the point of no return. And Debbie, you know what? I do worry about that. And I do worry about this upcoming election, that no matter who wins, one side is going to be very upset and maybe take it to the streets that night. Not to mention the fact that one thing the president says about mail-in votes that it's true. In some states, they can't even start counting those ballots until election night. So you're going to have a bunch of mail-in ballots that will, so conceivably, you could have a winner on election night, but when you count all the mail-in ballots, that could shift because I won't say Democrats necessarily use it more, because from what I've read, it seems like Republicans in states where it's allowed, they do it as often as the Democrats. And I don't know if you remember, there was even some pushback from Trump supporters in Florida who were upset about the president's attack on mail-in votes, because they use those ballots because they're older. You know, Florida has an older population, a lot of retirees. They're also a hotbed for the pandemic. So a lot of these older folks, they want to vote for the president, but he's scaring them about mailing their ballots in. So he kind of walked it back there. By the way, before I forget, totally unrelated to what we're talking about now, but here's some election year magic from Donald Trump. You remember it was a couple of years ago, he said he wanted to start offshore drilling. Even some Republicans were opposed to that, because we know that when they do that, inevitably, something will go wrong ultimately. And once the oil is spilled, you can't put it back in the ground. So you just fouled up your environment. Florida, of course, relies heavily on tourism and sports fishing and all that kind of stuff. They don't want their waters fouled up with all that sludge. So the president reversed himself. Not only is he signing an executive order protecting the Pacific coast, pardon me, I should say the Atlantic coast of Florida, but also the other side there, closer to the Gulf of Mexico. So no drilling there, no drilling off the coast of North Carolina as well. 2 Republican states, and they can rejoice. But if you don't think that he feels like these polls are getting a little scary for him, and he's got to appeal to these people, that's what's going on there. But back to the original point, the fighting in this country. One thing that was brought out was the fact that some of these people are indeed crossing state lines, including the young shooter, 17-year-old Kyle Rittenhouse. He crossed state lines from Illinois to Wisconsin. Interesting, though, this is the president's acting I believe he's the deputy Homeland Security guy, but he's talking about the penalties that will be enhanced if these people commit these crimes after crossing state lines.
Arrested in 3 different places.
Yes, and they draw special attention from us when they cross state lines, and that's been true in Portland, where you didn't have very many crossing state lines, but what you had was a lot of repeat offenders where you have a local DA who won't prosecute them. So we focus federal resources on that. Over half of the arrests in Kenosha, on the other hand, traveled from other places. When you cross state lines, you invoke other federal jurisdiction, and the opportunity for the federal government to prosecute you goes way, way up, and investigate how you got there, how did you fund it, and so forth. Sure. But because of the Fourth Amendment, we've got to respect the process, and we've got to have a certain level of evidence to begin using search warrants and doing those kinds of things to investigate the financing on the backside of this. And that's
of Fox News, if you'll notice, during that clip, which was only about a minute, when I say they run things on a loop, basically they showed the same footage twice, the same explosions, the same guy beating a wall, a plywood-covered window with a baseball bat. So these things are happening, no mistake about it, but are they being magnified by certain people in the media? I believe they are. I see postings on Facebook all the time. This woman sent one of people sitting out having drinks on a patio at a restaurant, and she was just mocking the whole thing. Yeah, the whole city's in flames. It's terrible here. You know, just like when they had that so-called autonomous zone in Seattle. It was a very small area, even though I was against it. These people were camping out, and ultimately 2 people got shot there. Bad news, man. I keep saying it, have your demonstration and go home. These long-term things, you're just inviting trouble. You're inviting people to come and try to get you out of there. You're inviting people who are bad actors to inadvertently mingle with
Today,
your
the
people,
FBI
thereby
the
tainting
Breonna
your
Taylor
message with
and
violence. I just think they need to rethink the strategy. But let's see, where are we now? Oh, well, this is some breaking news, kind of related to what's going on. Of course, all this started way back when. It's hard to believe with the shooting. No, that wasn't a shooting. Pardon me. There's breaking news on the shooting of Breonna Miller today, but this whole racial police discussion in this country started with the death of George Floyd under the knee of a police officer. Well, there have been a lot of deaths since then, and one of those is there's finally some action taking place in the shooting death of Breonna Taylor.
Apartment where Breonna Taylor was shot and killed 98 days after her death, as Louisville's mayor announced one of the 3 officers involved would be fired for misconduct.
Both the chief and I are precluded from talking about what brought us to this moment or even the timing of this decision.
But in a letter to now former officer Brett Hankinson, the police chief writes, "Your actions displayed an extreme indifference to the value of human life when you wantonly and blindly fired 10 rounds into the apartment of Breonna Taylor. I find your conduct a shock to the conscience." Protests over the lack of charges in the case have stretched far beyond Kentucky, intensifying nationwide after the killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis. Overnight in Louisville, more unrest.
We cannot tolerate the destruction we saw last night.
Hankinson was one of 3 cops who arrived at Taylor's apartment back in March with a narcotics search warrant. Police say the officers did announce themselves, but Taylor's family disputes that. Her boyfriend said he thought it was a home invasion and opened fire with his licensed handgun, injuring an officer. The officers returned fire, killing Taylor. Just last week, Louisville's Metro Council banned so-called no-knock warrants. Now, the firing.
This is another step, but it's a small step, and we still want the officers prosecuted.
The other 2 officers remain on administrative reassignment. None of the 3 has been criminally charged. No comment today from the police union, and Hankinson could not be reached for comment.
Well, there we go. And so I got my chronology wrong. I forgot Breonna Taylor was killed before George Floyd was killed. But that's where everything started. And stay with me on this. This is about a 3-minute segment coming up from the BBC. The whole world is watching what's going on here. And I think it's just a montage of pictures and sounds from the last 100, actually they say 100 days. It's been 106 days since George Floyd was killed. But this is, they call, at the time of release, what's happened in the last 100 days.
It's time for us to stand up in George's name and say, get your knee off our necks.
Americans know the truth. Without police, there is chaos. Without law, there is anarchy. And without safety, there is catastrophe.
Our commitment is to end our city's toxic relationship with the Minneapolis Police Department, to end policing as we know it.
Black lives have always mattered. We have always been important. We have always meant something. We have always succeeded, regardless. And now is the time. I ain't waiting.
We, the National Football League, admit we were wrong for not listening to NFL players earlier.
Protests erupting in the U.S. state of Wisconsin after police shot a black man.
And the man's name is Jacob Blake. In video footage, he's shown getting shot 7 times by a white officer.
Outrage at a time of heightened tension in the U.S. over police brutality and racism following the killing of George Floyd in the neighboring state of Minnesota.
What's his name? George Floyd! What's his name? George Floyd! What's his name? George Floyd!
My brother cannot be a voice today. We have to be that voice. We have to be the change. And we have to be his legacy.
106 days ago, George Floyd was killed, and it's hard to believe that all that stuff took place. And this is, it really demonstrated. This thing is a worldwide movement now. That's why when I see some Black Lives Matter people behaving badly, as I don't know if you knew about what happened over the weekend at a restaurant in New York, somewhere in New York City. A bunch of Black Lives Matter people went into the restaurant, started harassing patrons and all that. That helps no one. That doesn't promote your cause. If your cause is ending police brutality and bringing racial justice, then you don't help your cause by disturbing people who are just out trying to have dinner. That doesn't really bring people over to your side. And I don't know why that's so, that's something that has to be explained, because it should be obvious. That's not the way you do it. But let's keep moving. So there is, as I said, I thought that was a great thing. And that, once again, that was courtesy of the BBC. And what's up next? I'm trying to figure out where I'm at now. Let's see. I believe. Oh yes, there was. We talked about some of the violence that's taken place, and the Trump supporter, member of a group called Patriot Prayer, a right-wing group, who was shot dead, and then the man who shot him was taken out later by federal authorities. But this is a zoomed-in version of what happened, and so it's not. You don't see the blood, but you are watching someone shot to death. So if that bothers you, this only lasts about 2 minutes. You can turn away if you like. But I want you to see this. This is how it went down. And the guy that was the shooter, the alleged shooter, who's no longer with us either, well, he had a history with the Portland Police Department. But let's take a look.
I love that lotus flower. It's because it's lotus and bean. Oh, good. I love it when I hear revving engines. Not really, it kind of scares me. Do you have anything for eyes stuff? Yeah. I think I got it. I think I got it on film. Are you okay? I don't.
So, you say, well, why show this? Because I think we need to stop looking at sanitized versions of some of this stuff. People are actually dying. And as I brought up, I find it notable for particularly people on the black side of this. It seems that, isn't it interesting that most of the fatalities in the protest and riots have been white people out there trying to defend the rights of black people, trying to talk down police brutality. So this thing has really taken on a life of its own. And that's both a positive and a negative. As I said, I know a lot of you are defenders of Antifa because you think it's anti-fascist. Yes, but it's a little different because they, like Black Lives Matter, have no central leadership. They're kind of a loosely configured group, and some people are a little more radical than others. Some have no political agenda whatsoever. They're just there to vandalize and burn things up. They don't care what the cause of the day is. So in some cases, I feel the Black Lives Matter message has been hijacked by those people. So you've got to watch who you are affiliated with. And as I've stated before, I think that includes the Democratic Party. I understand that they want to be on the right side of history with all this, and that I personally believe that there's nothing wrong with being against police brutality. There's nothing wrong with looking for social justice. But as I said, make sure you know who you're getting involved with, because they can drag you down in the process. As a comment from Debbie here says, it helps Trump, and no doubt about it, the polls are indicating that. Although we still have a situation where Joe Biden is ahead in almost any poll you can look at. Well, in fact, any poll I've looked at, and we will take a look at those polls later. But this was, guns are dangerous enough, but I don't know if you caught this. the President of the United States had some comments. By the way, there is some truth to this. There were a few incidences where the protesters / rioters were throwing cans of soup, but it's not like soup is the weapon of choice. But listen to this interesting discussion from the president.
And then they have cans of soup. And they throw the cans of soup. That's better than a brick because you can't throw a brick, it's too heavy. But a can of soup, you can really put some power into that, right? Yes, sir. And then when they get caught, they say, no, this is soup from my family. They're so innocent. This is soup from my family. It's incredible. And you have people coming over with bags of soup, big bags of soup, and they lay it on the ground, and the anarchists take it and they start throwing it at our cops, at our police. And if it hits you, that's worse than a brick because it's got force. It's the perfect size. It's like made perfect. And when they get caught, they say, no, this is just soup for my family. And then the media says, this is just soup. These people are very, very innocent. They're innocent people. These are just protesters. Isn't it wonderful to allow protesting? No. And by the way, the media knows it better than we do.
I think what's interesting about that is the way the president, is it interesting to allow protesting? Well, you know, Mr. President, since it's allowed by the First Amendment of the Constitution, I think, yeah, protest is allowed even though you don't always like it. And I'm talking about the truly peaceful protests, not the ones, as I said, where these bad actors come in and start tearing stuff up. I don't condone that. Joe Biden doesn't condone that. He's made it very clear on multiple occasions that that's not what he's about, and he doesn't think that's what these protests should be about. So, but I don't know about the cans of soup, but the interesting thing was, let's lighten up a little bit. The whole thing with the soup led to a little bit of parody from the folks at the Lincoln Project.
And then they have cans of soup.
You think you can get soup?
This is soup for my family. You have people coming over with bags of soup, big bags of soup.
Please, you're wasting everyone's time.
Oh, this is soup from my family. It's the perfect size. It's like made perfect.
You're pushing your luck, little man.
But a can of soup, you can really put some power into that, right?
Very good. Very good. You know something? No soup for you!
So, Seinfeld meets Trump. And sometimes watching Trump is pretty comical in itself. But here we are, folks. Closer and closer we come to Election Day. And I guess I'd like to hear from you if you'd like to give us a call at 330-595-1600. That's 330-595-1600. Are you concerned about the election? Do you feel, I mean, it seems like pretty much everybody's made up their mind. There may be a sliver, that's the word I was looking for, a sliver of the population that doesn't know who they're voting for. But I think the people who are voting know exactly if they're voting for Donald Trump or Joe Biden. By the way, and sometimes I just like to hear what regular people have to say about this. And all we've been talking about, this is a lady who calls herself Heather G, and she calls her site Heather G TV. And this is her take on the violence and the president's reaction to it.
We got to talk about this. And while all this was happening, President Adolf Hitler was fanning the flames on Twitter. Now, those Trump supporters, nearly 1,000 members of Al-Qaeda, rolled into Portland ISIS style looking for trouble, and they found it. After egging on protesters who inevitably fought back, one Trump supporter was shot dead, just days after another Trump supporter killed 2 protesters in Kenosha. Our president is encouraging vigilante violence against American citizens instead of trying to calm the situation.
He knows that the more chaos and violence reigns, the better it is for the very clear choice on who's best on public safety.
They keep saying,
you won't be safe in Joe Biden's America.
But all this is happening right now in Trump's America.
Isn't it, though? Just a regular person's take on what's going on. Once again, Heather G TV, if you want to check her out. I'd never heard the president given that nickname. I won't repeat it, but I don't know. Interesting. But he has been more or less egging this on. When he sees these people behaving in this fashion, he calls them patriots. He doesn't say, hey, settle down, folks, let's be peaceful. He seems to like what he's seeing there. And that's irresponsible for a president of the United States. I don't care what your politics are. You've got to admit that he should be preaching moderation, not trying to say, hey, guys, yeah, well, you drive about 600 vehicles into Portland. What could possibly go wrong? But there's something else that's been in the news, and this was a story that was in the Atlantic. And according to, and by the way, fascinating that first it was easy to say this was a left-wing hit job, but I'm going to play a portion of this ad from the Lincoln Project, and then I will show you that not only was the typical mainstream media and left-leaning news sources supporting this story, but also got some support from an unexpected news source. But let's take a look at this first from the Lincoln Project.
Losers. Suckers. Dopes. Babies. That's how Donald Trump describes our men and women in uniform. Even Fox News confirms he said it. An American president would know our troops are defined by words like courage, honor, integrity, strength, patriotism, valor, and for so many, sacrifice. He's a draft dodger in chief who despises the men and women he supposedly leads. He insults their deaths and injuries with his contempt. He looks down on them for serving this nation, mocking them because there's no money in it.
And there you go. As I said, that's a portion of an ad from the Lincoln Project. And I'm just playing portions of these ads because I think we're getting closer to the election, and I think that if you play the whole ad, Facebook is like, hey, we didn't get paid for that. So just giving you a taste of it. But I think it makes a valid point. So anyway, the president and his supporters in the media and his supporters in general just think this story is totally bogus. But surprisingly enough, Fox News even verifies that people who were at this meeting with the president in Paris heard the president make these disparaging remarks. So this is from Fox News.
Spoken with two senior U.S. officials who were on the trip to France who confirmed to me key details in the Atlantic article and the quotes attributed to the president. My source, a former Trump administration official, told me when the president spoke about the Vietnam War, he said it was a stupid war. Anyone who went was a sucker. The president would say about American veterans, what's in it for them? They don't make any money. The source said it was a character flaw of the president. He could not understand why someone would die for their country. Not worth it. Regarding the French trip to mark the end of World War I, according to this former official, the president was not in a good mood. French President Macron had said something that made him mad. He questioned why he had to go to two cemeteries. Why do I have to do two? His staff explained he could cancel, but he was warned, they, the press, are going to kill you for this. The president was mad as a hornet when they did, according to this source. When asked if the president could have driven to the Aisne-Marne cemetery, this former official said confidently that there was not a security reason not to drive to the cemetery, which was about 40 miles from Paris. Quote, the president drives a lot. The other world leaders drove to the cemeteries. He just didn't want to go. Regarding the president's July 4th military parade planning, during a planning session at the White House after seeing the Bastille Day parade in 2017, President Trump said regarding the inclusion of wounded guys, quote, that's not a good look. Americans don't like that. Regarding Senator McCain, the president, according to this source, just hated John McCain. He always asked, why do you see him as a hero? Two sources confirmed the president did not want the flags lowered after McCain died, but others in the White House ordered them at half-mast. There was a standoff, and then the president relented.
And I don't know if you remember that when John McCain died, but at first it went out on Twitter and other places that, here was a guy who spent 5 years in a prisoner of war camp known as the Hanoi Hilton. Here's a person who served his country as a senator and a statesman for years. And this president was so petty that he didn't want to lower the flag to half staff. In fact, it was almost, I believe it was 11 o'clock Eastern time, maybe later, before the flag was finally lowered. And that was only after multiple media reports. Very petty individual. And, the guy's been dead for a while now, and Trump is still going after him. Just pretty pathetic. So it's up to you whether you believe this or not. I'm not pushing on this so hard because, just because it's from anonymous sources doesn't mean it's not true. The media tends to use anonymous sources in certain cases because the person giving the information knows that giving that information could endanger their job or their prospect for future employment. Let's remember that Watergate, the turning point in Watergate came from an anonymous source known only for decades as Deep Throat. He might have been anonymous, but his information was right on the money. By the way, a little trivia there. If you've ever watched the movie All the President's Men about Watergate, according to one of the writers, that was a made-up line, the follow the money line. Deep Throat never said that, although it's become legendary now, and there's a lot of truth to it. Almost with any corrupt government activity, if you follow the money, it will take you to the source. And that's what happened with Nixon. And by the way, even in the case of this president, if he is not reelected, as I brought up time and time again, he can be indicted by the Southern District of New York. That's a federal court in the campaign finance violation case, the same one that convicted Michael Cohen. Donald Trump was individual one in that case, unnamed, an unindicted co-conspirator. As if he's reelected, the statute of limitations will run out on that crime. But if he loses, they can go after him as soon as January. So there's one more reason to vote for Joe Biden. But, but when Fox News even verifies a story that makes you look bad, I kind of feel like the president probably felt a little bit like, keep that trigger finger ready. He probably felt a little bit like this. I don't condone violence. It appears that somebody with a chainsaw made that happen. It didn't just happen on its own, but I just thought it was a nice metaphor for where Trump is in many ways. His poll numbers are still not great. And do I have those polls up there? That's Politico. No, okay, I didn't. Okay, I will try to get those poll numbers because I did promise them today. But I can tell you this, there's nowhere, if the polls should be Real Clear Politics, I don't see it though. So maybe I didn't send that. I'm looking away from the camera. Okay, I will send that and we'll get that up. But let's take a look at one more thing. As if the president doesn't have enough problems, now it looks like his Postmaster General, Mr. DeJoy, might be in some hot water himself. He might have paid his workers to contribute to the Trump campaign. You are limited as to how much you can give to any given candidate. And so what he did was have these guys give money to the Trump campaign. Basically, they were straw donors. That's what they call it. Famous historical revisionist Dinesh D'Souza, right-wing favorite from Fox News, he was convicted of this. He actually had some people donate. He donated through other people. Basically, it's just one way for one person to exceed the limit. And apparently, Postmaster General DeJoy might have engaged in the same behavior when he was a CEO of his trucking company. And here's the story. Well, here's the president being asked about that.
Mr. President, if proven true, are you okay with Postmaster General DeJoy and the fact that he asked former employees at his private company to make donations to the GOP and then reimburse them. Are you okay
Yeah,
with that?
I don't know too much about it. I read something this morning, but I don't. Other than that, I have to see it. He's a very respected man. He was approved very much by both parties, I guess. It was sort of an approval that took place by both parties. I don't know exactly what the story is. I'll certainly know within a short period of time. I just read it for the first time. I read it this morning, just like you did.
Do you support an investigation, sir?
Sure, sure.
And
I think let the investigations go, but he's a very respected man. Again, it was a bipartisan commission. Postmaster General is appointed by a bipartisan commission, and we'll see how that goes. But no, I think he's a very honest guy, but we'll see. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President,
Go ahead,
follow up, please, if you don't mind. If it's proven to be a campaign finance scheme, do you think he should lose his job?
Yeah, if something can be proven that he did something wrong, always.
Thank you.
Well, there you go. And I apologize, that was kind of low volume there, but I was kind of surprised by that. This is the president's hand-picked man, and it sounds like I won't say he's throwing him under the bus, but he's basically, two things impressed me about that. He just answered the question directly like a normal president. He didn't attack the reporter for asking the question. And then he seems to be totally fine with any investigation of Postmaster General DeJoy. We'll see how this turns out, but if he did what they say he did, then he's in trouble, and he will no longer be Postmaster General. And who knows who would be Postmaster General next. I don't know if you knew, the Deputy Postmaster General quit because that job should have been his. Usually just, he's got the time. He was in that secondary position for years, and he should have been the next guy. But Trump brings this man in who has no experience with the Postal Service, and now it looks like he might have engaged in some questionable activity. Stay tuned, folks. It never ends with this president. Also, a little closer to home, I don't know, I want to play you a clip that was played at the Republican National Convention. And this was a local guy who is a big-time Trump supporter, and his name is Gino DeFabio. He's a union guy. He was a Democrat for years, but now he's just crazy for Trump. He gives President Trump credit for saving Lordstown. Well, the math doesn't add up, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But these are the comments. This was Mr. DeFabio with Vice President Mike Pence.
Gino's a truck driver from Ohio who heard politicians for years make empty promises about defending American jobs, only to see those promises broken again and again. But in 2019, when General Motors closed its plant in Lordstown, Ohio, President Donald Trump refused to stand by and watch it happen. And as Gino observed, this president reached out to General Motors to find a way to bring jobs back to Lordstown. And plans were soon set into motion to create Lordstown Motors.
President Trump says, this is how we fix it. And I thought, well, that's a simple solution. There's no other president who could have done it. There's no one that has even tried to do it. President Trump's a doer. He appreciates every one of us, and I know he does. I've seen it. When he said, make America great again, that was his task. That wasn't his slogan. That was his task. And every hat you see that says MAGA on it, that's what your president's doing for you. Thank you, Mr. President, for keeping the promises that you made.
Well, let's think about the promises that the president made. In July 2017, when Donald Trump came to town, if you remember, he famously said, all these jobs are coming back. Don't sell your houses. Remember all that? And here's, if this is, Mr. DeFabio, I can only say that General Motors at the time of closure had about 4,600 employees. At best, if Lordstown Motors succeeds, it will have 400 employees. So I don't see how saving 10% of the jobs is saving Lordstown. Of course, there is also going to be a battery plant, which is not affiliated with that, but maybe the two will work together. But as I said, no, I'm sorry. If you look at the way he's handled the pandemic, if you look at the way he handled Lordstown, you've had literally hundreds of people who've had to leave this area. Lordstown was not saved. When you have these Lordstown workers who are in Kentucky, who are in Texas, who are in Missouri, who are in Indiana. No, Lordstown was not saved, Mr. DeFabio. So you can say what you want to say, and I know you're a big fan of the president, but that's one promise he didn't keep. Finally, we're running out of time. Let's look at the flip side of this. This is from a site that I like called Now This, and this will finish us up. This is somebody who begs to differ with Mr. DeFabio's characterizations of Lordstown being saved.
Today, I would tell him how disappointed I was that he didn't fight for us more. Does Trump understand our communities or our families? I don't think so. We are a Christian family. I thought that he stood for what I believed in when I voted for him. But after watching the Twitter storms, I don't care whether you're the president or the guy next door. Nobody should act that way.
A large American factory stopped production today after more than half a century. 1,600 workers at the General Motors plant in Lordstown, Ohio, are affected.
Those jobs have left Ohio. They're all coming back. They're all coming back.
When Trump said all the jobs were coming back, I wanted to believe him.
Don't move. Don't sell your house.
As I watched 1,500 people leave, there were days that were really hard. Their kids stay here, and they go to Bowling Green, Kentucky to work, or they go to Spring Hill, Tennessee. The people here in the Mahoning Valley are amazing. I'm hoping that things pick up, because this is our home, this is where we love, this is where we work, and this is where we want to stay.
So there you go. And by the way, I got my numbers wrong. General Motors had about 4,000 employees there when all three shifts were running. There at the end, there were 1,600 employees. So either way, Mr. DeFabio, there's quite a bit of daylight between 400 workers at Lordstown Motors and 1,600 workers there at the end. So there you go. Oh, are we going to have time for those polls? Oh, there you go. Right there's a good place. Yeah, okay. Oh my gosh, Mario's on the job. And
we got a couple options. We could look at President Trump approval. We could look at a couple of different states. Ohio, Trump versus Biden.
Well, let's go there. Let's go to Ohio, and this is good news, by the way, and you can bring that up, of course. This is from RealClearPolitics.com. We'll finish up with this and take a look at the polling numbers. Of course, it's been very close here. If you drive around, you see Trump signs everywhere. You will be seeing more Biden signs in the upcoming weeks because they were just a little behind the curve. They are arriving. As I said, I picked mine up Saturday at the Democratic headquarters in Niles. They're in the Pine Tree Plaza where the Record Connection is and all that. But anyway, let's take a quick look at that. Okay. So this is, I'm trying to, can we scroll over and see what my sources are? Okay, so this is from Rasmussen in this order. Rasmussen's first, CBS News, YouGov, and then Ohio Media Collaborative. So the CBS has Trump up by 1 point. The other polls have Biden ahead by 4. So that if you're a Biden supporter, that's good news. But this is going to be very close to the state of Ohio. But let's, okay, we've taken a look at that real quick. We're right on top of the time here. I want to be on time. I'll tell you what, let's just leave it there. It's safe to say, though, in any poll you can look at nationally, Donald Trump is trailing. And in fact, he didn't get a bounce from the convention. So I just ask you to actually don't pay attention to the polls. Stay active. Make sure you're registered. If you got that mail-in ballot form, then if you want to go that way, get that in as soon as possible. I'm going in person. I'm going to try to go on a day when the traffic is not so heavy. Turnout will be everything in this election. This is going to be very close. But I think that it is possible that this president can be removed. I'm not guaranteeing. I'm just saying it's within the realm of possibility. But that depends on you and me, and I think we can do it. I want to thank Mario for making me sound so good, look so good, and I want to thank the rest of you for joining us. We'll be back Thursday. I'd love to see you. Like us on Facebook, and Debbie. This is Debbie Day, 2 different Debbies. I just real quick. Debbie says joke, GM and Trump. The other Debbie says, the same Debbie says, great show as usual, Mo. I'll catch you Thursday. Look forward to it. Look forward to seeing all of you.
Tell her to bring her friends.
And bring your friends. Mario's right. So I'm Mo Ray saying, as I always do, keep your eyes on the prize.